The Summer Games Minute, brought to you by Mass Mutual. The Olympics as we know them today began in Athens, Greece in 1896, and even then, those first official games in modern history would foreshadow America's dominance in the international competition. The first athlete to win gold at those games was an American named James Connolly, becoming the first Olympic champion in more than 1,500 years. But it wasn't an easy road for Connolly to make his way to Athens. He was an undergrad at Harvard and had to ask permission for a leave of absence. The university denied him that leave, but he defied the school, dropped out, competed in Athens, and made history doing so. MassMutual understands the nuances in how women want and need to manage their finances. With quality product solutions and guidance, a MassMutual financial professional can help you plan for both short-term and long-term money goals. Learn more and get started at massmutual.com.
The Athletic.
The race is on, and Carlos Sainz has made up his mind to join Williams, while Red Bull has confirmed Sergio Perez hangs onto his seat for the rest of the season. Or do they? I'm Ed Straw, and joining me to explain the latest driver market moves is Scott Mitchell-Malm. Well, Scott, I don't know about you, I've got a bit of a weird sense of deja vu going on right now.
Yes, and not just because we've talked about these subjects, it feels endlessly for the last couple of months. It's because we are back in the same hotel room that we were recording this podcast, or the first version of this podcast, two hours ago, something like that, maybe a little longer, or maybe a little less, I don't know. Time means nothing at the moment, but yeah, we're back because obviously ever since we finished that initial recording, which was all about Carlos Sainz and his decision and the ramifications of it, we've had news of sorts of Red Bull and Sergio Perez.
Yes, you'll be able to hear everything we recorded earlier shortly in this podcast, but this is a new start and new part one. And yes, we knew that Sergio Perez's seat was in doubt. We knew they'd be meeting today to discuss it. And then Christian Horner told the factory that Perez would be around after the summer break, seemingly confirming him for the year.
Yes, I think the way that we phrase this, I think we need to be careful. I am hopeful that we will be able to explore this topic in more detail in the coming days, maybe on the next episode of the podcast, whether you allow me to be a part of that, Ed, or perhaps maybe I do a little drop-in of sorts. I'm sure if I'm not there, you guys will take care of it. Hopefully we can explain this properly in the days to come. We are basically reacting to this, I think, within an hour or so of learning an initial bit of information. Here's what we can say. We know Christian Horner and Helmut Marko had a meeting today to discuss the situation. Red Bull leadership often meets at the very start of the summer break to review certain things. This was a bigger priority than normal. Checo was top of the agenda. Do we keep him for the rest of the season? Can we win the championship given the form he's in of late?
And let's just make very clear, that's not speculation or guesswork. That's emphatically what was going on. Red Bull sources have confirmed this repeatedly.
And Marko has spoken publicly about it as well. So this isn't just, background information. It's not private briefings or anything like that. This is open.
If Red Bull make out that it's not, and it's not been the case, in what they say in the future, they're lying.
Yeah, exactly. So you can only take people at their word, right? So, and that's kind of been our position all along, in that while I understand Checo doesn't like all of the stuff that gets talked about him, it comes from a place of accuracy and fact. And Red Bull started and has furthered the speculation with their actions and what they've said. So Horner and Marko have had this meeting, and since then, Red Bull staff have been told that Perez will be in the car. They haven't officially confirmed it in the form of a press release or an official statement. However, the words of Christian Horner, now I believe this is being framed as what was said at the factory, is Checo remains a Red Bull racing driver despite recent speculation, and we look forward to seeing him perform at tracks he has previously excelled at after the summer break. So, Perez will be in the car when the season resumes. We can take that as read. It's not been officially confirmed, and it's not been indicated this will be for the rest of the season. And the reference to tracks he has previously excelled could well mean Baku and Singapore, two circuits he's scored 3 of his 5 Red Bull wins on. There are obviously Zandvoort and Monza before then, so he's not going to not be in the car for those 2 European races, be brought in as a street track specialist, and then dropped again. But I don't know about you, but I am interpreting this as the decision is basically we can't make a decision and they're kicking the can down the road. And I really wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that they're basically giving a stay of execution to Checo and give him his old favourites of Baku and Singapore, because they're back-to-back now with this revised calendar for this year. And then they'll take a view after that, because there is another 3.5 week, 4 week gap after that, which would be another opportune moment to make a change if you felt the need to.
Yeah, the Singapore to Kota gap. It does sound like it's something along those lines. And I guess they will know if they're at panic stations with 6 races to go at that point. I find it a bit weird. I mean, so much about Red Bull's driver strategy is problematic. And it's not about, they should have dropped Perez or they should not have dropped Perez. This seems to be taking a middle line. And it just seems to me that this is a team that is not willing to really tackle its driver troubles head on. They've been going on for a long time. Yeah, they've had Verstappen in the car. Great. Verstappen's your first choice of driver if you had a free pick. Absolutely brilliant. Before that, they had the best years of Daniel Ricciardo. They had Sebastian Vettel being massively successful. But for the past 5-6 years, second drivers have been a problem. This junior team driver lineup has been a shambles at times, bringing in new drivers. I just feel like there's just some aversion to actually taking clear decisions. Either just say, yeah, okay, Perez is the guy, we stick with him for good now, or bin him and find something else. It just maddens me that the best team in Formula One, and that's what Red Bull are, who are so good at everything else, just leave this key element so much to chance and just going with whichever way the wind blows. It's astonishing.
I feel like they thought they could get away with it for this year because of the car advantage they've had the last 2 seasons and the way they started the season as well.
Not a crazy policy, in fairness.
No, and the way Checo was at the start of the season as well. That's one of the things that's been so confusing to the Red Bull hierarchy, is what's happened. Those first 6 races, well, we know what's happened. They've stopped having a car advantage. And they've also had a situation where probably as they've upgraded their car or tried to upgrade their car, maybe they have made it trickier to drive. We know how sensitive this generation of car is to good, sustainable development and actually doing things that improve the car, make it not just faster, but confident with the drivers in terms of how they feel in the cockpit with the balance that they have. And Checo is more prone to that than Verstappen. Verstappen can handle that much better. And both drivers have talked about this going into the summer break after Zandvoort. Verstappen said that basically said that who his teammate isn't the biggest problem. They've got other issues with the car to prioritise. Checo said that they need to work out because they've been a bit lost and they have to get the car in a better place effectively. So I think it feels like a situation that has almost crept up on them, but it should never have really crept up on them. And there's a few problems coming home to roost this year. This is one of them. If Checo can get it together and be back where he was in those first 6 races, no one has an issue with him being in that car. No one's calling for his head just out of maliciousness or anything like that. But the facts are on current form, and that is form on the majority of the season. For the last 8 races, 8 of the 14 we've had so far, so the majority of the season up to now, Perez's form is such that will cost Red Bull the championship. They are losing 9 points a race over the last 8 Grand Prix to McLaren, and they are lucky that they haven't lost more. If McLaren had maximised things and done a better job, McLaren might even have been leading the championship going into the summer break. That form, as I say, will cost Red Bull the Constructors' Championship unless Perez sorts it out or they replace him with a better driver. They are hoping against hope that Perez will get it together, but they were doing that before the summer break as well. That's why they wanted to have this meeting, have this discussion. And you're right, it just seems baffling to me to kick the can down the road and treat such a sensitive issue almost in a sort of blasé manner. I mean, how would you have felt, Ed, part of the rank and file at Red Bull, many of whom I'm sure are worried about Checo's form and what that means for the championship, especially if you've got thousands of pounds worth of a bonus for winning the Constructors' Championship riding on it?
Yeah, I think that would concern me. And also just the point of people are slogging their guts out to try and win this championship, and they will feel that maybe there's a weak link there. So yeah, it's it's a difficult situation. Maybe it's helped by the fact that all the alternatives Red Bull have on their books have very large asterisks against them. You wouldn't bet your bonus on Daniel Ricciardo or Liam Lawson. I was going to say, or Yuki Tsunoda, but actually Yuki Tsunoda you could make a very strong case for, I think, at the moment.
But even Ricciardo, before the summer break, like the races before the summer break,
he's
on balance,
Ricciardo
has been better than Tsunoda, and he has actually been quite strong. He was strong again in the Belgian Grand Prix. I feel like a few races before the summer break, my understanding was that Ricciardo and Perez had basically been told, up your game before the summer break, because that's when we're going to revisit things. It wasn't a promise or a threat either way, but it was a give us your best so that when we sit down, we've got absolutely everything we have. One of the drivers pretty much rose to the occasion. You know, has Ricciardo been stunningly good in the midfield? No. Has he been good, effective, and doing pretty much what you can with that car? Yeah, I think he has.
Yeah,
actually.
He's been pretty decent.
So I don't really see that he has, floundered in that situation, whereas Perez has. He hasn't risen to it. And it just doesn't make any sense to set, not conditions, because they weren't conditions or targets or anything official like that, but to sort of have these sort of milestone moments like the summer break, which they talked about. They said they wanted to use that, get out of the race weekend and then have a proper conversation about it. And then do nothing. I mean, like I said, I hope and I expect that we will learn more about this in the coming days. Then we can relay that as much as we can to all of you people that are listening, because there has to be some rationale to this that we're missing. The only thing that makes sense to me at the moment is, as I say, that stay of execution. They really, really don't want to make this decision. I cannot stress that enough. They do not want to drop him unless they feel they absolutely have to. It felt like in Spa they had got to that point because of his poor race on the Sunday, having started second and then finished 8th. But they can't quite bring themselves to it, because wanting to do it, or not wanting to do it, sorry, but feeling like you have to do it and then actually doing it are two different things. It's a trigger that you cannot unpull. And I don't know if they're not brave enough. I don't know if they're not convinced enough. I don't know if it is something to do with the backup drivers, but there's something that has made them freeze, and now they just want to wait even longer. But the longer that they wait, the more they put themselves at risk of being in the position that they lose control of in the Constructors' Championship, and then maybe it won't matter who they put in the car. Yeah,
ultimately, Perez could, turn it around. He is someone who's got genuine ability. Yeah, he's not Max Verstappen, but at his best, he's a very, very effective Grand Prix driver. So it is possible that may happen, but I don't think we've seen anything. We didn't see anything at Spa. Even qualifying was fine, but it wasn't stunning, and then the race was very underwhelming. He was effectively last in class, slid from second on the grid back to 8th on the road, 7th after the disqualification of Russell. So yeah, very, very odd situation for Red Bull, and I think they're almost hoping it will resolve itself. I do wonder what they're thinking for 2025 as well, whether they may need to make a change there. Otherwise, they could be in exactly the same position next year, and they're going to keep butting up against that position, I fear. So some serious thinking needs to be done at Red Bull about their driver strategy across the board. They need to sort that out, because I don't understand why it's acceptable for it to be so shambolic. Quite frankly, they need to decide their long-term approach and lock into it and stop doing this sort of thing. Right, well now, Scott, we can hand over to Scott and Ed from a bit earlier in the day to talk about Carlos Sainz and other matters.
Which I think we can trust our past selves to be a little bit more definitive about a few things rather than trying to read between some slightly murky lines.
Exactly, on much firmer ground.
You know we love talking stats here at The Athletic. Here's one that's super simple to remember. Discover automatically doubles the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back to $300. That's right, you could put it towards some memorabilia you've had your eye on, or treat yourself to a premium sports network. You earn and Discover doubles. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
We've been waiting for this for months, haven't we?
We have, yeah. It's nice to finally stop speculating about signs or talking about this twist or that twist. There have been a lot of moments where it's felt like it's going one way or another. But if I think back 6 or 7 weeks to when it really started to feel like Williams was, maybe even longer than that, really, maybe 7 or 8 weeks, Williams was really starting to feel confident that it was edging ahead, and it made its case. The Audi position had kind of stagnated. They'd thrown everything at Sainz and failed.
It was kind of Japan time, wasn't it?
Well, I think it was. I think Williams the timeline of this is obviously a little bit murky because no one ever really left the conversation. That was the whole point. Sainz was happy to make sure that everything was kind of in consideration in the mix. So I think it was down to Audi and Williams by around mid-late May. And then from there, I think it was trending towards just Williams. Then we know Alpine came back in the picture with their grand plan to not be a works team anymore and have a Mercedes engine, which was basically the factor that made Sainz reconsider them again. But Audi sort of gradually just fell further out of contention. Alpine's star shone really brightly, very briefly, once Flavio Briatore got involved, and then that kind of got seen through, I think. So that wasn't quite as appealing. And then Williams was the constant. So they sort of came back into pole position. James Vowles was sounding very confident, wasn't he, when we heard from him at Spa last weekend? And here we are. I'm glad I didn't make any strong predictions on the post-race podcast this time that there was absolutely no way that Carlos Sainz was going to have a Williams contract in his pocket or something like that.
Yeah, far more sensible. And it's a strange situation for Sainz because he's doing a very good job at Ferrari. I'd say by rights he should be in a top team. He'll probably be quite frustrated. And I imagine that was part of the process, actually, accepting that he won't be in a winning car next year. And he did want to hang on for that opportunity. Could Mercedes or Red Bull come to him? But it's been clear for quite a while that was desperately, desperately unlikely. So he had to almost pick from what I've called the least worst option. And that might sound a bit disrespectful to the teams he was considering. But if you'd said on January the 1st to Carlos Sainz, you're going to be choosing between Williams, Sauber and Alpine, he'd have laughed at you, I think.
They're the three worst teams on the grid at the moment. On championship points alone. I'm not judging them on anything else. I'm not.
James Vowles himself said to us on Sunday, Williams are underperformed.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're a team that is unappealing if you look at the bare facts of this year, much the same way you would not go to Sauber. You'd have to think several times over about going to Alpine, which is for now the Renault Works team, and it will still be the Renault Works team in the future. But
I'd only think once about going to Alpine, say no, and then consider other options.
That is very fair. Maybe you need to be really, really low on options and therefore have to keep thinking about them, as maybe that was the position that Sainz went through. You said he kind of had to come to terms with his reality, I think. But
he did actually, I think, spend a lot of time really thinking about this, really delving into what these teams were doing. I actually think you can characterise it two ways. You've sort of joked about him finally making a decision. So you could say, well, he's been dithering. But I actually think he's just been really, really rigorous in trying to look into where he's going to go. And rather than just sort of saying, oh, to hell with it, I'll just go with the big manufacturer, or I'll go with whoever pays me more, or whoever gives me the most freedom, he has tried to go somewhere that he can really commit to.
And my understanding is the deal was done this morning. Big scramble, basically. Not in a rush, but, it's because it was always the case that Sainz could wake up one day and decide, I've made my mind up, I'm going to sign. And what this shows, by doing it on day one after the first half of the season officially ends, or first part of the season officially ends, we're not on summer break technically because teams go into shutdown really next week for a fortnight. But to have been able to do it now, on Monday after Spa, shows that, one, the due diligence had been done. They'd spoken to all of the teams at length. They knew what the propositions were. They'd done the negotiations. They'd got the contracts in place. And two, that Sainz had seriously been thinking about it. And it's all well and good, his family, his representatives going around and speaking to people. But if they were then going back and then Carlos was saying, no, I don't, I'm in the middle of a season, I don't want to hear this. Or to your point earlier, Ed, Sauber, Williams, Alpine, I don't want these. No, come back to me when you've got a Mercedes or a Red Bull offer or something like that. It shows that he was properly engaged, that he was having conversations himself, that he was listening to feedback, listening to the people that he trusts, those close to him, processing all of this information on his terms, at his pace, so that as soon as the season basically paused, he could go, right, I'm actually fully ready to make my decision now and can act quickly. I don't think you can do that if you haven't got all the pieces in place beforehand.
Yeah, and James Vowles talked about the fact that it was important for Carlos Sainz. In fact, I'm just looking at what he said to us on Sunday. He said, here's what he told me that resonated the most. The reason why I'm doing this is when I commit, I need to commit with all my heart and all my soul 100%. And to do that means I can't have any doubts. And that's why it's taking the time. That's what Val said. Sainz told him about it.
And yeah, and I think what you would say when you look at those options is I don't think Sainz has any doubts about Williams. I think what he has is knowledge. He has doubts about the others. Alpine has doubts because we don't, at the moment, know who the team boss is going to be. We think it's going to be Oliver Oakes, but Bruno Fernand's stepping down. They haven't announced who's going to replace him. We don't know what their engine's going to be. We think it's going to be a Mercedes. We think they're going to scrap the Viri engine program, but they haven't confirmed that. It's in, even by Renault standards, it is in a bizarre state of flux. And the third thing, we don't know if Renault's going to carry on owning that team in the long term. They say it's not for sale, but they're doing, to quote you basically, Ed, they're doing everything that you would do if you were going to sell an F1 team. Those are the doubts about Alpine.
There's no way he could sign for Alpine in those circumstances. No. I don't think anyway.
Absolutely. Audi, there are doubts about that. There are doubts about the Sauber side of things. Why the hell is that car so uncompetitive this year, and why can't they seem to make any real progress on it? Who's going to be the technical director there? Because they've just binned off Andreas Seidel. James Key's the technical director at the moment, but James was an Andreas Seidel hire because they worked together at McLaren. How long is it going to take Mattia Binotto to come in, get his feet under the table, assess the situation there, work out what to improve? How long is it actually going to take to make those improvements? And of course, the other unknown, what's that Audi engine going to be like? My suspicion is that engine will be perfectly good eventually. Might not be the best out the blocks, but it doesn't matter if your team's absolutely hopeless.
I think if Sauber was delivering pretty well on track now, he might have more seriously considered it, but they are moving so slowly. The staff level at Hinwil is still around 600. That's a lot smaller than Williams. Williams are recruiting and recruiting. What was the number that Val said?
It's over 1,000. I think it's 1,100.
Yeah, and over the last 17 months, it's like 250
300 people, something like
exactly.
that. It's growing very quickly.
Exactly. So they're getting people through the door very, very rapidly.
Exactly. So those are the doubts about those teams. With Williams, as I said, I don't think you have doubts. I think Sainz has knowledge. You know what the limitations are there. You know that it's not a guarantee that they will deliver on all of the potential, all the nice things that James Vowles and the board are saying and promising Sainz. But you can see a strategy, you can see a plan. It's sensible, it's secure, it's stable. The foundations there are actually quite strong, and that leadership's not going to change. So you see things like, okay, what are the reasons for underperforming this year? Well, we were late with everything at the start of the year. We had a very complex car build process. We were late on upgrades. The car's massively overweight. We're chipping away at that. They should get down to more or less the weight limit by the end of the season. Might have a couple more kilos in it than they want, but over the winter they'll resolve that. So they could make short-term gains in 2024 and then big gains in 2025 as well. But it's beyond that. It's not just 25, it's 26 and beyond. They're, in broad terms, not promising anything that the other teams aren't promising in terms of join with us and I'm sure you'll be part of this fantastic journey. But that's why I say it's not doubts at Williams. It's just quite clear knowledge, admissions that they're underperforming, but good reasons why, and a plan in place to, if we tick all of this off, I see no reason why we can't succeed. I don't see the doubts there that I see with Alpine and Audi. And that's not to say that Williams is a perfect choice. Like I say, it could go wrong. But if it goes wrong, I think it'll be because of something that you can't really foresee. I don't think you can judge the trajectory that Williams is on based on its generally miserable 21st century history.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a completely different animal since Doralton Capital bought it. It's on much more stable financial footing, and the wider Formula One world is as well. I think actually you can be very, very confident in what Williams is doing. James Vowles has a very clear plan. You can see plenty of evidence of him enacting it. The only real concern for Sainz is timeline, isn't it? He's 30 in September. He did not want to step back to a project team at this stage in his career. He wants to be in a winning car. So exactly what the timeline is another question, but you can absolutely see why it's the most compelling option. And all credit to Vowles and Williams for convincing him of that. I just wanted to throw in a question from the Race Members Club. This was actually sent in after the race, so we'll slightly update it, but I think it's worth talking about because it's the path not travelled for Sainz. Lachlan Babbage sent in, what impact will the appointment of Binotto by Audi have on their chance of signing Carlos Sainz for next year? Is he someone that Sainz will be willing to work with, or will it just push him closer to signing elsewhere? And I think it's interesting. Obviously, that question is out of date because of when it was sent. But I don't know how you view it, but I think Binotto going to Audi could have changed Sainz's mind, but not on this timeline. Had he gone in a lot earlier, Sainz is close with Binotto. There has been a little bit of contact since this appointment was made. Had he been able to see really what the plan is and see the wheels turning, maybe that could have convinced him. But I don't think if you're Carlos Sainz, no matter how much faith you've got in Mattia Binotto, you throw your lot in with him purely on trust.
No, I don't think you can do that, especially because he had seen the best of what Audi could have to offer. He knew Seidel very, very well. They worked together at McLaren. Got a lot of respect. He was Seidel's number one target for a very long time. Seidel had courted him for forever, basically, after going into that job.
And it would have been a big money, very long-term deal. If he wanted a 5-year deal for some huge sum of money, he could have got it.
Yeah, and he'd have been sold on everything. He'd have been shown this is what we're doing with the infrastructure. This is what we're doing with car development, and this is what we're doing with recruitment. Come and look at our engine program, or this is what we're doing with the engine program. He'd have been told everything about what Audi has to offer, and he still said no. And so there wasn't really anything Binotto could do coming in, especially as he's not starting until mid-August, to be able to say to Sainz anything he hadn't heard already. He would have needed to wait. They did speak. I know they spoke around Binotto's announcement. But Binotto needs to go in there and see, we've talked about this already on previous podcasts, but he needs to see what kind of team Sauber is, what Seidel's done, what he hasn't done. And
it's always a 3-month process. Whenever anyone goes into a team, they say that takes 3 months.
Yeah, exactly. And Sainz didn't have that time to wait, really, because it just drags on too long. It dragged on far too long already. And if even then you wait 3 months and you're still unimpressed, by that time, Williams has signed Valtteri Bottas.
Also, if you're James Vowles and you're doing this negotiation, James Vowles is a strategist. There is no way you move the deadline again. He has tried to lay deadlines before, but I think the August break was always a natural one. But there's no way you're going to say to Sainz, oh yeah, we'll let the other guy that we know you've got a good relationship with have some time to convince you. I think if I was Vowles, I'd have said, right, sorry, this is the commitment point. We're willing to commit to you. You've got to commit to us, A, before the break, and B, it needs to be a multi-year deal, because we should stress that James Vowles was very adamant on this. It's none of this 1-year deal so he can go somewhere else. They want a couple of years out of him at least, see how it goes in 2026, and then it'll be what happens beyond will be down to options, etc. But they needed him to actually say, no, this isn't just a stopgap.
No, and you're right, this was the time for Vowles to make the play and just say, because he'd said to us, hadn't he, that he'd drawn a line in the sand, and now we know that was probably, because I think I asked him, is that the summer? Do you think you'll have it done in this by the time of summer shutdown, which is effectively the end of the week as we record this podcast? And that's when he said he'd drawn the line in the sand. So I think we can take it as read.
And he had a 10-time Grand Prix winning Valtteri Bottas waiting in the wings, probably with contractual terms also agreed as a very valid option. If you had a rubbish backup and you're Carlos Sainz, you think, oh, you're not going to take him. But Valtteri Bottas, you think, no, he's a bit good. I could see them going for him.
Yeah, and we spoke. So when we say here that we heard from Vowles, we spoke to him on Sunday at the Belgian Grand Prix. It was actually, I feel comfortable sort of sharing this anecdote, because not only were there several journalists in the room, it was all recorded, it was all on record. The Netflix cameras are also there. So there's no hiding, and I don't think this does Vowles a disservice, but I'll share it anyway. I asked him, and the reason this comes to mind is because of what you were saying about what we were saying, that was the time to strike. I said to him, the situation now, the strongest play they had was to move for Sainz now, non-negotiable, because you've got Williams being confident in their case, but it looks like the situation at Alpine seemed to have put him off, and Audi had just had a massive change. They were in flux. It's going to take Binotto time to come in and do stuff there. And so I said to Vowles all of this and said, is that playing a part in drawing a line in the sand to make your move now? And Vowles replied, are you suggesting the others are shit and we're the best option? To which I said, you might be a good option and the others might be shit. It could be both of those things. And it was a slightly flippant exchange, obviously, and Vowles did go on to then give a serious answer. He said, no, he knows that Sainz is a smart chap and he'll know that Audi will throw everything at this, making a success. So I think his point was more like Sainz isn't just going to assume that Audi's terrible and therefore he has to sign for Williams. But the point at the heart of it is what we were saying. Actually, the cases for the others have got weaker. Williams hasn't. And I go back to what I was saying before. You know what you're getting with Williams. You might have doubts about the others. You might, if there's one doubt you have about Williams, it is simply like, will it actually cash in on all that potential? But that's a doubt that's universal in any sport, not just F1 when it comes to sporting organisations. So this was the chance to just go, right, now or never, mate. You know what you've got with us. You can take your chance with them if you want, but if you want to be with us, if you want to be part of this journey, if you believe in this, if this is what you're ready to commit to with your heart and your soul, we're here and we're waiting, but we won't wait anymore. And Sainz has gone, okay, I'll go away, I'll think about that, and boom, here we go, deal done.
Yeah, it's a great deal for Williams, I think. They're fortunate he's available and he's been shuffled out. There's all sorts of blockages at upper-end teams that in normal circumstances he would have been a no-brainer because he is operating at a very high level. Look at how close he is to Charles Leclerc. I do think Leclerc on a single lap is a fractionally quicker driver, but Sainz is so close. He is a very, very good driver and he offers a lot more than just speed. He can win you races. He will get you results. Sainz Albon is a better driver lineup than Williams for its current level deserves. And it's to the credit of James Vowles and what's going on there that they've managed to line up those two.
It's an absurdly good lineup. There is a small chance, I don't think big, but it's non-zero, that Williams is the least competitive team next year. If they trip up, if they have another difficult winter, if it's not quite ready, if Sauber get their backsides into gear with all the Audi backing, it's possible that Williams is 9th or 10th next season. It might happen. And yet they've got a driver lineup that, if you've got the car for it, is going to be scoring points every single race. And if you've got the car for it, it's going to be scoring podiums. And if you've got the car for it, it's going to win because Carlos Sainz is a race winner. And I think Alex Albon has evolved into a driver that's capable of doing that. I mean, I know we don't have a full grid yet, Ed, so I'm kind of stitching you up a little bit here, but that is going to be one of the best lineups on the grid.
Yeah, I think that's legitimately something you can say. They're very, very likely to be among the best performers next year. I'm just trying to remember last year, both Albon and Sainz were in our top 10, weren't we? We do our top 10 performers of the year, and they're pretty much regulars in it. And they're
definitely
very,
two
very
of the
strongly.
top 10 drivers on the grid.
Yeah. So that's very, very strong for Williams.
So before we started recording, and this, as we record this, it has only just gone out, so it was about half an hour ago. I did a quick tweet. I did a poll on Twitter, on X, asking people for their strongest midfield lineup of this bunch from next year. Aston, Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll; Haas, Esteban Ocon, Ollie Bearman; Williams, Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz; and Audi, Nico Hülkenberg, Valtteri Bottas. And that's with my best guess of what happens now. It strikes me as quite likely that Bottas, against all odds really, if we think where it was at a few weeks ago, we'll renew there. So I've had just over 500 votes. You don't have to name the specific split for all four. What do you reckon the Williams number's at in that?
80%?
83%?
Yeah, it just seems overwhelming. I think you can throw in the fact they'll be better than the undecided lineups, the Alpine lineup.
They'll be better than Alpine, definitely.
And the RB lineup with the options around.
Be better than RB, and
sure.
Frankly, yeah, I mean, it's only going to be lesser than, your Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc super team.
Exactly, yeah.
But considering how well balanced it is it going to be worse than whatever the Red Bull lineup ends up being? Is it going to be worse than George Russell and a rookie Kimi Antonelli? It's not going to have maybe that immense peak of that lineup, maybe, but it's going to be a better lineup overall in terms of what it delivers in the season, surely. Yeah,
it's a cracking lineup, and it's just what Williams needs. And it's also two drivers of that level who'll keep pushing each other on as well. And Williams hasn't had two properly strong drivers for a very long time as well, so it's important.
When was the last time you reckon they had the lineup this good?
I think probably it's the Bottas-Massa combination they had for
Which
3 years together. Well, I think it was pretty good throughout their 3 years together, actually, but Williams gradually got worse. But look at it in 14, they were both getting podiums.
Massa's still strong enough.
Massa got a pole position in 2014. 16, they were still good.
Yeah, that's
It's
fair.
Just that the car had deteriorated ultimately.
But that is the level we're talking about, isn't
yeah.
it? That was back when they had a hotshot young driver and a multiple race winner and almost world champion.
Yeah, and they've got two drivers who are in demand, who are both well paid on these deals, And that tells you how different Williams is. It was scratching around taking pay drivers not so long ago.
Well, that was one of the things Val said on Sunday, wasn't it? That he said he now thinks that they've got a commercial department that's as big as Mercedes, if not slightly bigger, and he feels that they've massively increased their marketing and commercial appeal. They've got lots and lots of partners now across team shirts and on the car than they had before. So it's not just Dorilton piling and money into this project and backing, signing people like Carlos Sainz or giving Alex Albon a long-term deal or funding recruitment. It's also other external partners that are willing to come in and boost the team, because Dorilton, it's not just empty pockets. It's not a blank checkbook, empty pockets, or endless pockets rather. It's something that has to eventually become sustainable, profitable, and actually work as an entire organisation, not just be a good race team. And it needs to translate into actual on-track results sooner or later, sooner ideally, but you can't fault it as a sort of long-term direction. And that's why I say that trajectory, if you step back and look at the bigger picture, is good. The results on track are still better than they were a few years ago. It's just not consistently turning into points, not quite yet. But there is reason to believe that will change over the next couple of years.
Yeah, Sainz signing is just one small part of the impressive development of this team, and I'm sure it will pay off down the line. Well, let's have a quick look at the rest of the driver market. So let's quickly talk about Mercedes. This confirms what we already knew pretty much about the situation there, doesn't it?
Yeah, it hasn't changed anything. It has underlined it. So Kimi Antonelli is the favourite to get that seat. That is clear. Unless Toto Wolff succeeds in his long-term ambition of luring Max Verstappen away from Red Bull, which, as the 24 season goes on, you think every time you think, well, there's zero chance of that happening, the circumstances do kind of make you think, well, maybe it's a bit more likely than we ever thought it would be, because Mercedes is on the up, Red Bull is on a little bit of a downturn, there's tensions that appear from time to time and problems off track and blah, blah, blah. Can we rule it out completely for 25? I don't think... It doesn't feel like it's going to happen.
I think stranger things have happened. You could file it under, but right now it's not going to happen.
Would have said,
which probably means it'll happen
exactly.
tomorrow.
Well, when we recorded that podcast back in January, we didn't think there was any chance of Hamilton leaving and going to Ferrari and all of this. So, we've proven ourselves fools on this podcast many a time, especially when it comes to driver market matters. But I think we can be still pretty confident that Verstappen will be at Red Bull next year, so Antonelli alongside Russell, because now they don't have the option of going cold on Antonelli and going, actually, Sainz is still available, and going, actually, Sainz is still available, let's get him on a 2-year deal. Antonelli's not ready, he needs to do F2 for a bit more or go to Williams or something like that. That option is off the table, and I don't think Wolff ever wanted to go down that route. I don't think he ever wanted to be that disrespectful to Sainz, and Sainz didn't want to be in that position, but it was always there, wasn't it? All the while he was a free agent, that possibility was there.
Sainz was always number 3 on the Mercedes list as the fullback behind number 1 Verstappen and number 2 Antonelli. So he's only ever a fullback, and Antonelli's testing well. F2's coming together, so that's fine. Now, Audi's situation, I think it would be a huge mistake not to re-sign Valtteri Bottas, personally. I can't see any driver on the market who offers what he offers. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I was curious to ask, you've always been sneakily a part of Bottas's management team, haven't you?
I do rate, but look, Valtteri Bottas, I'd have said when he was on the way up that maybe this guy could be a future world champion. He's not that, but not many are world champion caliber drivers. He's very, very good. He is performing well in a team that's all over the shop at the moment, and I just don't see where they'll get somebody like that. Also, he's very, very low friction in the team. He's a good team player. He works well with those around him. He offers continuity for that team. It just seems perfectly obvious to me.
It is. He is an absolute no-brainer now. And it's now likely. I sincerely think if there hadn't been the leadership change, if Andreas Seidel was still there, Binotto hadn't come in, and this news still came out today, I wouldn't be as confident sitting here on this podcast and saying Bottas will still sign.
Yeah, I think Seidel's regime was very keen on a clean sweep, whereas I think Binotto will come in differently. Binotto, of course, has been up against Mercedes when Bottas was there as part of all those Constructors' Championship wins. I think there has been a little bit of contact already there. So it just seems logical to me to go with that.
I think so. And it would just... it just shores things up. A Bottas-Hulkenberg lineup is about as good as that team. Well, no, it's better than that team deserves. Sauber, in its current form, does not deserve two drivers of that quality in the medium term. It has wasted some very good Bottas years. Now he's been better than people think. I know that we've obviously had plenty of reasons to visit Valtteri Bottas Sympathy Corner. I truly hope we don't have the ultimate reason to go there, and it turns out he actually ends up missing out in all of this, because obviously it's not guaranteed. We don't know for sure that he will do that. I think they will realise it's the sensible move. Obviously, if the Audi thing doesn't come off, maybe Alpine comes back on the table for Bottas, but as recently as Spa, that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, they should look at Bottas, but I don't think they're going to.
No, and I don't think he's that interested in going there. I think he is also wise to the fact that is a fairly chaotic place. So it's either going to be Jack Doohan, who has been in the background for a while there. He's been doing a lot of testing work. He's
back out of Spa this week.
Yes, exactly.
Doing the TPC program, the previous cars testing.
He's driven all kinds of Alpines now. I think he's driven 3 different Alpines now across his time.
Lots of simulator work.
Lots of simulator work. Has been in FP1s as well. And
impressed the team as well with his diligence and he's brought a little bit of edge to it. He's really been pushing.
He has.
So he's been trying to balance up.
Well, I remember
pushing.
I remember a couple of years ago, back when they had the whole Oscar Piastri driver saga. Actually, Doohan was like messaging the Alpine CEO Laurent Rossi and trying to be like, okay, is there anything? What can I do? What can I do? So I think that's in his character, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's had a bit of a roller coaster ride through this, because he's been talked about very seriously as a candidate right from the start of the season at Alpine, and it was getting to the point where it looked like he was going to get it. Then suddenly,
well, you spoke to him back in Canada, didn't
you?
I remember you wrote that piece.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
The website.
Yeah, he was sort of a serious contender there, and then Sainz came on the scene. There was probably a few weeks where Sainz's favourite destination was Alpine, and so Doohan was probably thinking, oh, that's done it, I'm not going to get into F1, and now he might well again. But you mentioned another driver with some F1 experience, so
yeah,
I'm not convinced this is a particularly serious option for them, but it could be.
Yeah, it's Mick Schumacher, who is sort of part of the Alpine family. Obviously races in the WEC with the brand. He's Mercedes reserve driver for 2 seasons at Haas. He's been around the place because of that WEC program. He's driven the car as well alongside Doohan. He's done it's a 22 car, isn't it? Obviously that they're running in the TPC. So they've looked at him. They've always said it's part of the WEC program and sort of the driver development there. But I don't think he's 100% out of the equation. But I'd say Doohan's the favourite.
Yeah, and he's been very good in WEC, but he's not been earth-shattering. Let's put it that way. So
he's a good driver. Like
exactly,
but he's not a megastar, and there is this feeling that mistreated by Günther Steiner and Haas didn't get a fair shot, but he was ultimately quite poor up against Kevin Magnussen, who has been quite poor up against Nico Hülkenberg. So really, there wasn't really much of an argument for keeping Schumacher at Haas. But I always did feel at the time that if he got another shot in F1 in a slightly different environment, one that is a bit more friendly and arm around the shoulder, maybe that would bring a bit more out of him and we'd see a different side of him. I don't think that's going to be the environment he gets in Alpine's chaotic Formula 1 team, frankly.
No, that's not ideal. Ultimately, if he does get back into F1, I don't think it'll be a disaster by any stretch of imagination. Like you say, he's a very capable driver. I think he probably will do better, but it feels like Doohan is there very much on pole position. Obviously, they've got Victor Martins as well, who's having a challenging F2 season, but is very, very quick. He has won a race this year, but that's been pretty difficult for him, and he's in that family. But Doohan, I think, is well ahead in the queue there. A word for Logan Sargent, who is therefore confirmed out of Williams next year. The press release they sent out did refer to the fact he's going to give it his all in the coming races for us, so at least that kind of confirms that they're not going to replace him mid-season, although there is still a little bit of a concern there for him, and it's not ideal that Spa wasn't a great weekend. He'd actually had a nice little upward curve again, and then Spa was just a bit all over the place.
Yeah, Spa was really poor, which was unfortunate because he'd been on his best sort of mini run of form of his F1 career. The thing that will probably keep him in the seat to the end of the season won't be his form. It'll be the lack of options and the fact that it won't really make a difference. They're not going to get signs in before the end of the season, and there's no point, I just don't see there's any point in trying to get like a Kimi Antonelli in for a few races if you're not going to run him next year.
I think the only scenario where they might do that, and it should be stressed, people say, oh, Vowles will do this for Toto Wolff. James Vowles doesn't work for Toto Wolff anymore. Yes, he has a good relationship with him. I'm sure if Toto Wolff were to go to James Vowles and say, we want Antonelli in that car for half a season, James Vowles' response will be, right, well, what's in it for us? And I'm not going to be sold just on the fact we'll get a quick driver for half a year who might score us some more points. What will you do for us to facilitate that? That's the only scenario I think they would do that.
Yeah, they're not there to be a training ground or to just sort of facilitate this. They're not going to throw away half a season's worth of efforts.
Williams is not a vassal state to Mercedes.
No, and that car is on the fringes of points. Albon could have been in the points again at Spa. Could have been, if the races had gone quite differently, he could have scored points in the last couple of Grand Prix. Having scored points at Silverstone, I think was the last time.
Yep.
So that's where that car is. And as I say, like, it's getting lighter. They've got more upgrades coming after the summer break. They're going to take more weight out of the car. Vowles thinks they'll be fighting 4 points or around points in the second half of the year. They've got championship aspirations. They've got prize money to fight for. They can't just waste that just doing a favour to someone else. It would have to be massively favourable to Williams to do something like that. And there was all that talk about Esteban Ocon doing a seat fit. Vowles always said that was based around evaluating him for next year because Ocon is not just a tall driver but a slightly awkwardly proportioned driver as well. So much like Alex Albon being one of the lankier guys on the grid, you just need to make sure that you're not going to have anything problematic to have to deal with. I suspect there could have been something there if Ocon had ended up a Williams driver. We know everything going on with Alpine, blah, 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 so that could have been doable. I don't see anything like that really being possible. I'd love to be proven wrong, not because I want to see Sargent drop off the grid. I think it would be harsh. We've said this on the members podcast. I think it would be harsh for him to be dropped mid-season, especially when he's had this sort of mini turnaround. But just because it would be interesting, it would be a fun story to have a random driver drop in halfway through the season just to see how they get on.
Yeah, we should say as well that Williams have also said that they're hoping to be able to help Sargent for 25 and not completely abandoning him. Ultimately, dropping him from the F1 team isn't a great show of support, but they have funded him in F2 and given him 18 months in F1 so far and probably a couple of years. So I think ultimately, as I've said before on the podcast, Sargent could have made that seat his own and hasn't done so. Williams would have loved to have kept him because they'd have trained him, they've invested. Return on investment, great thing to do, but unfortunately
it's a waste of time and money if it doesn't turn into something that you can actually sort of use long term in your F1 team. Like, that's what driver programs aren't done just to be really nice to people and give them opportunities. They are an investment, and Sargent hasn't been worth the investment in terms of points return or being a long-term prospect for the Williams F1 team. And I think that he's probably given it everything he's got. I feel like we've talked a little bit about sort of attitude and the way he's been so defensive recently, sometimes on the offensive. I know he doesn't like the speculation and the scrutiny. I've always said if he was doing a better job, his team boss wouldn't be actively courting other drivers and would have ruled out emphatically by now replacing him during the season. So if he's got any problems, he probably should not. It's the same as the Sergio Perez situation. Instead of having a go at the people reporting what's going on, maybe have a look at yourself and speak to the people in the team who are creating the situation that's going on.
Yeah, and even in difficult scenarios, and it has been difficult for him this year with the spec offset, losing the car in Australia because Albon took it over, etc. It's been difficult.
Definitely.
But drivers can shine in that. The team knows what level of performance they can expect. And Sargent has hit that level of performance occasionally, but he hasn't anything near frequently enough done that. And the learning, the progression curve, it's there, but it's not been steep enough.
No, it hasn't. What I would say is if this had been his rookie season, I think you'd have had no doubts about giving him a second year. I think there'd have been enough through the year. But really what we've seen from him this year should have been his rookie season. It's not, it's his second year. He should have kicked on a bit more. He hasn't. And ultimately there are just like, it's not even just that, there was a chance to upgrade to an Antonelli or something like that. Like, is there something beyond a no-brainer for putting Carlos Sainz in the car instead of a Logan Sargent? Whatever that word is, that's what this situation is.
Yeah, very, very much so. And good luck to Logan Sargent in finding something. Maybe he'll be able to find something in IndyCar. He's been linked with that. That could be a logical progression. And I'm sure he'll look around and see if he can keep a foothold in Formula One and maybe try and come back in the future. So thanks very much, Scott. We are going to be podcasting throughout the August break. So stay with us for everything you need to know from the world of Formula One.
The Athletic.